All right, we have more changes unfolding in the US economy and in corporate America, changes that have some incredible new information coming out, published by a major investment bank, homing in on what we've been projecting here on this show for all of 2023, the coming wave of corporate defaults and bankruptcies. And they use the Fed's Z1 data, which is what we've used in prior videos to try to get an early look into debt levels and into loan activity, as the SLOOS is only released quarterly. But they went a step deeper and they found something pretty amazing. They were able to pull something out of the data, which we didn't see. And we also look at how many companies are about to meet their makers over the next year. This is not something that you're going to want to miss, folks. But before we get started, if you're not already a subscriber of this channel, consider subscribing. It helps the channel out, and I appreciate your support. So this report that we're about to look at together did us all a solid, all right? It dives deep on the question that matters most and is always the area that lags the most coverage in financial media. The reason is because it's just hard to get good data on. Corporate debt loads, for instance, how many companies are in that particular place right now where, should interest rates rise, stay higher for longer, wouldn't have the means to meet their debt burden, essentially equating to a forced bankruptcy. Now, how do you answer this question? There's a number of ways. We've focused on the number of corporate loan maturities over the next few years, which there's a ridiculous amount of. A wall of corporate debt is barreling down over the next couple of years. 2023, just a prelude, folks. But there's another way to look at it, to analyze it, using what's called the interest coverage ratio, which is a way to determine how likely a company is to pay back their debt. The higher the interest coverage ratio is, the stronger and more creditworthy that company is. The lower it is, the more likely they are to get KO'd, and why, as an investor, you should avoid them like the plague. Now, we've explained why this is happening in past videos, the combination of the Fed's higher rates combined with QT, quantitative tightening, which forces banks to write less loans, tighten their lending standards, meaning making it harder for everyone and anyone to get a loan and obtain credit, but it doesn't affect everyone equally. The most creditworthy of borrowers can still find a bank in most cases to lend them money, but for everyone else, forget about it. And how do we know this? Because of SLOOS, the Fed's most important survey for this monetary cycle, the Senior Loan Officer Opinion Survey, which the Fed governors and presidents are watching like hawks, keeping it along with other weekly loan numbers at the top of their dashboards, because that's what will slowly implode an economy. We are a debt-based economy. Almost every business, virtually everyone, relies on some sort of debt. Think of it like a hose, folks. They've turned that knob almost entirely to the off position. So the flow of money right now is only trickling out, dribbling out, instead of flowing full blast like it had been for the last decade. So who will be first affected by this? Borrowers who depend on their lines of credit. For many small to mid-cap companies in the Russell 2000 or the S&P 1500, lines of credit are more than a lifeline. They are critical to their operations. Large caps, like the largest of the S&P 500, won't be affected. Companies like Apple have such large cash reserves, they could act as their own bank for 100 years and be fine. And this new report that we're about to look at exposes that division more so than I've seen before. This actually explains, clear as a bell, why the official data shows that we've yet to fall into recession. Wait till you see this. And combined with the data that we have on corporate loan maturities, it explains a hell of a lot, including how we're coming into this very rough period. And that's why, to survive any sort of market shakeup, it's imperative to acquire real assets that could hold value regardless of time or place, to be able to try and maintain growth potential and stability. This is also why 98% of the ultra rich allocate at least 5% of their portfolio to art, and why thousands of people are doing it with today's sponsor, Masterworks. Masterworks is the first and leading platform allowing anyone to invest in shares of blue chip artwork. They've used decades of experience and auction data to become one of the largest art buyers on the market. Their performance has remained impressive through COVID, through inflation, interest rate hikes, and more. 15 exits each and every one returning a profit to investors. Just weeks ago, they sold a Cecily Brown piece for a 77% annualized return on the heels of launching their largest offering to date, a $36 million Basquiat piece. Over 800,000 people have joined the platform, folks, and shares have sold out within hours. So you don't want to miss out. Skip the wait list and start collecting today at the link in the description. All right, so let's check this out. Put together by Albert Edwards over at SocGen Research Team. This entire piece is just great. He opens the report saying this: history shows that to the limited extent economists do actually predict recessions, its tardiness usually means they give up waiting just at the point that it arrives. The bus stop dilemma. The resilience of corporate profits has been a key reason this recession has been delayed so far, especially as companies in aggregate are now a net beneficiary of higher rates. Yet beneath the mega caps, the vast bulk of companies are in big trouble. Now, he goes on to explain what we've been highlighting on this channel for the last 6 months, what we just outlined at the beginning of the video, this burning sensation that most of the corporate world is feeling right now from the banks turning off the flow of easy money. But he found something important. Check this out. He writes this: one thing is certain, the U.S. corporate sector in aggregate is a massive net borrower. We can see that clearly from the Fed's Z1 data. Hence, normally when interest rates rise, so too do net debt payments, squeezing profit margins and slowing the economy. But not this time. Corporate net interest payments have instead collapsed. He goes on to ask, what on earth is going on here? All right, so he writes this. Take a listen. The collective SG macro brain reached the conclusion that large companies which are able to access the corporate bond market have effectively played the yield curve in reverse, borrowing long fixed and depending short variable, and becoming net beneficiaries of higher rates. So higher rates have added 5% to profits over the last year instead of deducting 10% plus from profits as usual. Hence, it's not just greedflation that has boosted U.S. profit margins and delayed the recession. Interest rates simply aren't working as they once did. All right, so this is where it gets interesting. Take a look at this. He writes, U.S. company net interest payments have collapsed over the last year despite rising rates. This is the opposite of what you'd expect to see right now, folks. Why in the world would net interest payments be lower today than they were a few years ago? Makes no sense, right? Well, what they found when digging into this is that the mega caps, the largest of the Fortune 500, your Apples, your Googles, your Amazons, Nvidia, etc., all had seen this coming and prepared the way that you'd expect any smart and effective executive team would. They locked in their rates and paid off a significant portion of their debts right at the start when the Fed's monetary policy went into action, basically made very prudent decisions. And when you compare the debt payments pre-pandemic, for example, between the mega caps and the small caps, the size of the loans come from the mega caps. They're just dealing with such larger amounts of capital. And we can see here how the big guys aren't feeling any pain so far. Here's the average interest rate by company size being paid right now. The interest rate paid by the largest 150 companies is virtually unchanged, but the mid caps are seeing their profits squeezed and the small caps are being crushed, absolutely crushed, the way that we've been talking about and had expected. Now, if you remember from the beginning of the video when we discussed the interest coverage ratio, a way to determine how likely a company is to be able to meet their loan obligations, well, take a look at this, folks. This is as clear as it gets for what's unfolding right now. The higher your interest coverage ratio is, the more likely you'll be to service your debt payments. Anything under 1 means you're filing bankruptcy. Anything under 2 means you're working with very tiny margins. Any hiccup in your operations probably would jeopardize your ability to repay your debt. Well, look at the average ICR for the Russell 2000, sitting around 2%, but realize this is lagging. They calculate this based on a company's earnings before interest and taxes, so it's coming from their 2022 full year earnings numbers, which means it's much worse than we see here. And again, this is an average, so a portion of these companies probably have negative ICRs, which means start readying for bankruptcies, folks. You could see it here on the wall of corporate debt maturities that are quite literally barreling down right now. 2023 is a tiny fraction of what's coming next year. And in 2025, then look at 2026. If rates were to stay elevated over the next few years, we will see a plethora of corporate bankruptcies, and with this loan maturity schedule about to go into overdrive and the number of bankruptcies already surging, which you could see right here, ask yourself what in the world is in store for next year. Alright, if you enjoyed this video, got something out of it, press the like button. If you didn't, that's alright too. Press the dislike button. Either way, I appreciate you watching.